Never change this one setting on your drone except in one specific situation, or you could lose your drone. My name is John Meyer, and this is the Flying Filmmaker drone tip of the week. So the setting that you should never change except in specific circumstances is the signal lost return to home behavior. And to access this, we'll just go into our settings here, come to safety, we'll scroll all the way down to the bottom, click on advanced safety settings, and right up at the top we have signal lost, and there's 3 options: RTH or return to home, descend, and hover. If it's set to return to home, which it is by default, if you lose connection with the drone, it will simply ascend to the return to home altitude and come flying right back home. That's one of the greatest fail-safes on DJI drones, is that they very dependably return to home whenever you lose connection with them. Now, if you set it to descend, it will actually pop up a little warning box that you're saying you're changing the aircraft's behavior when signal is lost. And when it's set to descend, if you lose signal with the drone, it will just simply start landing straight down into whatever is under it, and it will detect if there are obstacles there and will just hover until it runs out of battery and then fully descend. And if it's set to hover, if you lose connection to the drone, it will simply hover there until you either come back into range, reconnect to it with your remote controller, or until it runs out of battery, and then it will again just auto land down into whatever is directly under it. Now, it should be pretty obvious why you don't want to switch this off of return to home, because if it is set to either descend or hover and you fly too far away and lose connection with the drone will just either hover there out of range where you can't get to it, or just start auto landing and likely go even further out of range. And both of those could very easily lead to you losing your drone. Now, there is one situation where you actually don't want to have it set to return to home, and that is if you're flying in some kind of a confined space with obstacles over top of the drone. For example, if you're flying under the trees, under tree branches in the woods, or flying indoors in some kind of a space like that. I actually pretty seriously crashed my original Mavic Pro by not having changed this setting. I was actually standing just a few feet away from it, flying at a waterfall under some trees, and for some reason it decided that it disconnected from my remote. It of course automatically started returning to home, started going up to the return to home altitude, and ascended straight up into the limbs of some trees, got all tangled up in the branches, got hooked on a branch, and it was a huge pain to try to get it down. Had to knock it down with a stick, and it fell down and got pretty seriously damaged. So from then on, that's always been something that I make sure to keep in mind whenever I'm flying in some kind of an enclosed space with obstacles overhead. I always make sure to switch signal lost from return to home to hover, so that if for any reason I do lose signal, instead of just ascending straight up into things, it will just hover in place, and then I can just simply move closer to the drone, because usually when I'm flying underneath things, I'm not flying so far away that I can't physically move closer and reestablish connection. But the only catch with this is you have to make sure to remember to switch it back to return to home when you're done flying in those enclosed spaces, because if you don't remember to do that, it's very easy to then fly out of range and expect it to just simply return to home, but instead it will just hover there. I've actually had this happen before where I totally forgot and I nearly ended up losing the drone, but thankfully the drone still had enough battery that I was able to just walk closer to the drone's location and reconnect to the signal and fly it back. And I can't think of any situation where you should set this to descend. You'll always want it to either return to home if you're flying long distance, or hover if you're flying in enclosed spaces. So that's it for this week's drone tip. You can visit flyingfilmmakerpro.com to learn how to shoot better drone videos, and make sure to subscribe to this channel so that you don't miss any of our weekly drone tips.